You may recognize that song as I Have a Dream by ABBA. The reason that I'm bringing that in is this month the theme is about greater good, as you may have gathered from the chant for this month. And the focus for today's talk relates to oneness. So to explore oneness in the context of a greater good, I'm going to have us consider several stories and consider several historical events, things that are happening now. And ultimately, what I want us to get to is, how do we apply the notion of oneness in practical activities that we do, in practical ways that we direct our thinking? How do we grasp greater good and bring it into our lives? So some of the stories. When I say greater good, what comes to mind? When you hear the words greater good,
Peace of mind.
peace of mind, Grindelwald,
Highest and best.
highest and best,
Good for all.
good for all. Another thing that plays with me, and one of the things that I was bringing forward, is that sometimes if there's greater good, then is there not enough good now that we need some greater good? The notion that the human mind is designed to think in comparisons. It's very difficult to operate as human beings and not have the mind see things and make judgments. And I see nodding. How many times do I'll claim it this way. There are many times that I go through my life and I am making judgments left and right. I might be the odd one here, and the rest of you may have entered a better state of spiritual soundness. That judgment isn't on even your toolkit, that you don't even have judgment happening anymore. I find that I still do have judgment. So the notion of greater good, sometimes with greater good, I'm thinking that it's a better good than the good that I have now. That there's something better than what I have now. Take a moment and consider something that is going on, and there's an imagined better circumstance than what that circumstance is. So close your eyes, be present to that circumstance that is going on, and then become present to the better that's imagined. And in that better that's imagined, let your whole body feel that. What happens with the body feeling that? Perhaps there's a sense of peace. Perhaps there's a sense of ease. Perhaps there's a sense of excitement that this greater good is just bursting through. Whatever that is, just let it be present to it. Just let it be in the body. Let it be in the cells. Now, having that experience of that greater good, come back here. And in that greater good sense, how long did that take? Did it take a long time? Was there a big traumatic thing that people had to go through to get there? It's just a matter of how we focus ourselves. It's just a matter of how we let ourselves be in the world. One of the big things that was being identified in the talk for today is that we are swimming in an ocean of good. That good is all around us. And the thing is that sometimes we let other things so occupy our attention that we lose sight of that good that we are breathing in, that we are breathing out. We've all seen the image of a person that is just drowning, right? Drowning, and you throw them the life preserver. And, they're like up and they're gasping for air. I can say for myself, sometimes I feel that I am gasping for good the way that person gasps for air. And again, maybe I'm the only one, maybe all of you are much more spiritually advanced than I am, which is certainly possible. And that might be why I'm here, because I get to be in the presence of spiritually advanced people. And in that gasping for air, that air never stopped being available. Did it? It was our access to it. And sometimes we forget. One of the things that I am very, very grateful to my mom for is that she always made sure that I had swimming lessons. Because my mom always had ear infections. She never learned to swim because she couldn't get her head wet. Because if she got her head wet, her ears were going to be worse. So she was like, my kids, they are going to be able to swim. Doesn't matter what. And I'll tell you, at the time, I was not always enthusiastic because I was all about the same kind of body fat mass ratio index. I'd get into the water and I would turn blue. I would be instantaneously blue. It could be August 30th and I would be blue in the water. The little teeth would be chattering away. But I'll tell you, what I did learn through all of those swimming lessons is that you can always do something to get air. Now, the dead man's float was particularly difficult for me because all of the other kids would be in the water and they'd just be floating and I'd be like sinking down. I would be sinking down. And the instructor would say, come on, you need to relax. And I'm like, I'm relaxed. But it's hard to be relaxed as I'm sinking into the water. And there's nothing like holding me up. And they're like, you're just not relaxing. And it's like, well, like I said, it's hard to relax when I'm just sinking into the water. And I just didn't have enough body fat to hold me up. But the whole notion is that you can rest in the water. I didn't have to be doing this, which is what I would do to keep warm all the time. What is this? It's called treading water. And treading water was great because it was something that I could be doing it continually, and it was something that would at least keep me warm. And the chattering would go from to about like We are always capable of just stopping. Dead man's float, as it was referred to, or the dead person's float. I'll try to be a little more politically correct, because as a child there was nothing remotely like political correctness anywhere, or any way to even think in those terms. The dead person's float was just a way to relax, a way that the water was there, the water was all around, but there was also air, and the notion was you could just take a deep breath in and then go back. And you could literally be in the water for hours and survive. We can literally be in difficult situations for years and survive. There are all kinds of stories that talk about people getting through. And getting through to a greater good. One of the stories that I want to play with a little bit is the story. How many people are familiar with the story of Moses and what Moses did for the Hebrew people? The Hebrew people had been enslaved. Was life good? Was life good? No, it was not particularly good. Now, Moses had a particularly interesting or even mixed background. Moses' mother was concerned about his well-being when he was born. So she kind of sent him down the river, and he got adopted into the family of the king, of the Pharaoh of Egypt. So Moses was raised not to the lifestyle of a slave, but he was raised to the lifestyle of wealth and of speaking his word and having people listen to him. That was not the experience of his family. his biological family. So Moses had this mixed background. Biologically, he came from these folk that had been for years and years and years and years and years oppressed. And yet he was raised by the very oppressors of his people. Now, do people remember what it was why Moses didn't continue to be in the land of the oppressors? Okay. Well, Moses saw an act of oppression, and he turned and he stopped it. He saw someone beating one of the slaves. He saw someone whipping one of the slaves, and he told them to stop. And Moses, who was used to being listened to, was not listened to. And in his anger, he killed the man. And then when he killed somebody, he fled. Now, this story isn't about a recommendation for going and murdering. But sometimes there is a part of us that we do need to end. There is a part of us that we need to say, stop. In order to come to a greater sense of oneness, we have to stop beating up and brutalizing. We have to stop victimizing. So, looking at the story of Moses in a metaphorical way rather than you should do this and then this happens. What if Moses' killing that man is the call for us to stop identifying with and continuing to put ourselves in a vantage position of the oppressor? Now, we may ask, how could I possibly do anything that's oppressive? I'm sure that we could turn to people in our lives who could count the ways that we have engaged in oppressive activities. I mean, we all like to think of ourselves as well-intended. One of the things that's been very powerful that I've been learning with racial equity work is that it isn't simply intention that matters, it's also my impact. I had somebody who was busy and they couldn't give an answer, so I just went through without waiting or without seeking out their impact. And I felt terrible, so I said, what is it that I can do? Because I don't want to be perpetrating on the basis of good intent. I don't want to be perpetrating injustice. I don't want to be perpetrating stuff. And the person was very kind and said, you know, you're worrying too much. You're taking too much on you. And I think, though, that doesn't absolve us from being able to look at what our impact in the world is. If we're to engage in oneness, it is about looking at our intent and our impact. Now, as that story with Moses goes on, Moses goes and he has a whole other life. Again, I don't know about you, but sometimes, how many of us are in our families of origin, and then we step out of it a little bit? And we step out of our family of origin, and it's a little bit different. I'm seeing some nods. I'm seeing some nods. It's a little bit different. And how many of us then have to get called back into our families of origin? And sometimes when we get called back in, it's very hard to not just readopt and bring back everything that we used to practice. All of those old habits. Sometimes that's what it is about fitting in. And it can be very uncomfortable trying to come back. And it's like, you're not like you were. What's up with you? Why are you doing this? If you were to just go back, things would be much more comfortable. Usually the parenthetical part of that would be much more comfortable for us. And we're going to do everything we can so that it's not comfortable for you. So that we can kind of convince you to go back to what makes it comfortable for us. And again, I'm getting a little bit overly psychological here. But in the story, Moses has gone away, and Moses gets called back by a burning bush. This is no small like little thing. This is a burning bush, a really big deal. You can't come home and say, oh yeah, the burning bush was talking to me. I had to ignore it. The burning bush. Moses, go back, free my people. Wait a second, I don't talk so good. Get somebody who talked better. How many times do we feel, I don't talk so good, I'm not so powerful, me can't go back, me no good there. And the burning bush is insistent. The burning bush is, I don't care. I don't care what disability you claim you have. I don't care what weakness you claim you have. What doesn't get said in the story, but what gets absolutely implied in the story is that because you have all of the power that I am. That's the thing with oneness. We may come into situations and feel completely powerless. I mean, in the song, I Have a Dream, they go through darkness. They're crossing the stream. Moses crossed the stream. He was on the other side of every bad thing that had happened over there. He didn't have to think about oppressor and oppressed. He was just managing some sheep. And sheep are pretty easy, right? The idea of sheep is they just follow. You set parameters and they kind of go where they're supposed to go. But the divine said, go back, let my people go. And Moses goes back, and he goes back to his brother, the guy that was raised as his brother. And his brother is like, oh, Moses, it's so good to see you. I have missed you. What can I do for you? I'm delighted you're here. You know, it's kind of that whole sibling rivalry thing. The brother who's now the Pharaoh is not so, like, welcoming. Here, let me roll out the red carpet. You're back, woohoo, we'll have a party, we're going to set the table, it'll be a grand time, it'll be a great thing. The brother is not welcoming him in an experience of oneness. He's not welcoming in a, this is all for my greater good. Look at you. You're here for my greater good. Because Moses is saying, let my people go. Moses is calling for greater justice. Moses is calling for greater good. Now, does the Pharaoh say, absolutely? I love that idea. Let's get together, let's come up with a plan. We'll have this done by Tuesday. You know, we'll book it in our schedules and everything will be fine. No. And how many know what happens next? There are some things called the plagues. Plagues. These are not good times in Egypt. Seven plagues. You've heard 7 brides for 7 brothers. There are 7 plagues for the country of Egypt. Metaphysically, Egypt was thought to have been a place of ascendant wisdom. What does it mean for 7 plagues to come into this place of ascendant wisdom?
It was sort of knock you on your pins in terms of that.
Exactly. The Pharaoh is the god. The Pharaoh is perceived as the god of it all. And yet, when the operation is grounded in selfish injustice, in the use of others for the advancement of some, but not for the advancement of all, these 7 plagues. And the number 7 is, again, metaphysically, is the idea of the full meal deal. This was not like a partial, let's see, it's like everything's knocked over. You know, and the final one is the angel of death riding on through town and wiping out the firstborn son of everyone whose household is not marked by the blood of the Lamb. Okay, so for many years people are putting lamb's blood. The idea is, how do we mark ourselves and immunize ourselves against those consequences, against the consequences of setting ourselves up as oppressors. A greater good is to take into account the suffering that's happened. What if that experience was so that for the first time those people could genuinely feel the hurt that had gone on? It took so many things until it was finally enough, that there was finally on level with. And at that point, the Egyptian people was like, let them go. We've had it. We're not going to hold on to them anymore. That's the story. And you think, okay, great, it's a happy ending. But then they flee and they get to the edge of the sea, and then there's the whole army behind them. Right? The whole army is riding on them, and the people are like, Moses, you took us out of our homes. We had these lovely homes. You didn't have lovely homes. They were not lovely homes. You were in slave barracks. You know, they're like, what are we going to do? And God calls on Moses to use the staff, and then the waters part. How many times do we feel like waters part? Something that seemed absolutely freaking impossible is making itself possible. In the story of oneness and the greater good, sometimes it is events that transpire, that have nothing to do with our will, that have nothing to do with our own effort. I mean, it's not like the people of the Hebrew people were standing there on the edge of the water, on the water, blowing it until it would separate. The water parts, they cut across, and then the Egyptians, who are in hot pursuit, are going, and then they start to notice when the rest of the Hebrews have gotten through that the waters are not holding firm anymore, and the Egyptians are wiped out. How often do we feel like we have the need to see our oppressors completely wiped out? How often when we're watching a movie, when we're waiting for that villain to just get their just desserts? How often do we feel that, the show ends and the villain is still doing perfectly fine? The one that was causing all the trouble, they go off and they live happily ever after. How satisfied are we that that's the outcome of the movie? I look at you, shake your head. It's like we don't find that satisfying. We want the oppressor to be annihilated. Yeah, Dexter got annihilated in his own way. Greater good and oneness. Can we let go of that which has no regard for the well-being of others? Can we let that die? What does it take? Just simply be finished with it. So I tell this story about Moses. There's another story with respect to oneness that I want us to consider. A farmer had 3 sons, and the 3 sons did not get along at all. A little bit like Moses and the Pharaoh. They were not the best of brothers. So the father has 3 sons, and he is very concerned. He's thinking, if my 3 boys don't get their act together, somebody is going to take them out. And he's really at a loss. He's been telling him, I just want you to get along with your brother. Don't you know what my brother is like? Don't you know what a hateful, miserable person he is? Well, I want you to get along with your brother. How could I get along with my brother? He's just awful. He's just terrible. And the father is feeling more and more and more distressed about this. So, he comes up with a plan. He sends the 3 boys out. I want each of you to find a strong stick. Go out and bring it back to me. So each of the boys comes back and they're very proud. They've got their strong stick. And the father takes each of their sticks and then he binds them together. And then he calls the oldest son in first. He says, here's the sticks. I want you to break the stick. And the brother's like, oh, I can do that easy. Give me an hour and it'll be done. It'll be broken. And the son spends about an hour working on it. 0 success. So the father said, notice what happened. Son kind of goes away sulky. Not too pleased. Calls the second son in. Remember those sticks you got? Your brother couldn't get this. Thinking that might motivate this one. How about you? Do you think you could break this? It's like, give me a minute. My brother couldn't do it in an hour. I could do it in a minute. Now, obviously, his minute goes way faster. And he does not have the sticks broken at all. Father shakes his head and he's like, calls the third son in. You know what? Brother number 1, brother number 2, they thought they could break the sticks. What about you? Give it to me and I'll get it done in a second. I'll look at it, it'll be done like that. Hands it to him. The stick is not broken in a second. Dad calls the 3 brothers in and goes, now, he unwraps the sticks, he unbinds them, hands them to each of the 3 sons. It's like, break the sticks. They break the sticks. It's like, do you notice something here? And the 3 sons are like, yes, I do. You notice that when they were together, none of you could break the sticks no matter how confident you are. Yet, divided, you broke it like that. There was no trick to it. So in that activity, the 3 sons did learn that in oneness, in being united, there's a strength that was completely unavailable when they were independent. How do we seek for union, for oneness, for community in our lives? I mean, one of the spiritual practices that we engage in here at Northern Lights is every week we do community share because we lean into the strength of unity. We lean into the strength of a supportive greater presence, greater wholeness. Now I'm going to fly back into that story of Moses. Moses and his people are traveling through the land. And they do not make it overnight, do they? It's not like they leave Egypt and then 2 weeks later, here we are
40 years.
at Shea Moses in our lovely new accommodations. It takes them 40 years. 40 years is the period of a generation. It takes a generation before people can arrive. During that generation, you may remember that Moses went to Mount Sinai and he spent a whole lot of time up there, and at least scripturally, God gave him a set of plans for how you should live. Moses comes down bearing the plans, and he's thinking there's going to be a lot of hoo-ha, and I'm going to be getting a parade like the Super Bowl folks get when they get their awards. I have these fabulously, God hand-carved stones. He comes down, and what does he find? He finds a golden calf.
The last thing he expected.
He's thinking there's going to be this big celebration because I'm bringing you. You all have been wanting evidence. Now, like you didn't have enough evidence. You didn't have the evidence of the plagues. You didn't have the evidence of my rod turning into a snake. You didn't have the evidence of the water parting. No, you wanted evidence. I've got the handprint of God's finger on these rocks. And you're now bowing down to this golden calf. You're exactly worshiping in the same way of the Egyptians that you said you wanted to not be with anymore. What I love about it is that Moses gets really angry. It isn't that Moses is just like all like, oh, look at you, he's all zen. Oh, how cool is that? We've got our calf, and we've got our commandments. It's all good. Moses has a hissy fit. Purportedly, Moses breaks the commandments, and he melts down the calf and he makes them eat it. Yeah, he melts it down and he makes it. He makes them swallow it. He's like, "You people, you are so bad." He is not a happy camper. What does that have to say to us metaphysically? I think one of the things that it has to say metaphysically is sometimes that anger, we all like to think about how our life is intended to be just ongoing bliss and ongoing joy. But I think the important thing in the story is that the full spectrum of human emotions are accessible, and it is through the divine operations that we are able to be, we are able to find our being and live. That even in that rage, and even in that fury, there's the presence of the divine. That's in that story, there's divine operation. How often do we want to pass over that? Again, I don't know about you, but I know, I'm never too gung-ho to talk about all the ugly things I've done in my life. I'm a worthy person because, the time that I sent that check late because I wanted to be passive-aggressive.
Oh.
Time that I'm like, well, I lost that. I didn't lose it. I had it on my desk. I just didn't want to pay it. I didn't complete that report because I was really irritated. And I was going to make the district wait. The divine is able to operate in everything that works, even those emotions that we might want to hold at bay. But it didn't end there. Moses went back to Mount Sinai. And God did another set of commandments. God didn't punish Moses and say, look, you were all angry and put out, so you get to suffer too. Came down with commandments 2.0. Oneness and greater good. There's always another opportunity. So even if we messed up, there's another opportunity. Again, I don't know about you, but I know for me, I feel that knowing that there is a renewal, a new opportunity, is a blessing. That greater good is available. So what do I want you to do? What do I invite all of us to do based on these stories? This week at school, we are celebrating Black Lives Matter at School Week. Find something in our lives where we are going to stand up and we are going to say no to oppression. Moses crossed away from that, and he thought he left it behind. What will we step away from? What oppressive actions will we deliberately put behind us? Big or small? I mean, if I'm wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, I'm possibly inviting that conversation. Well, don't all lives matter? And then I can graciously say, you know what? All lives do matter. And the fact of the Black Lives Matter is that for so long, there's a clear counter message that Black lives don't matter. And I'm wearing this shirt on top of things every day this week because I'm proclaiming that Black lives in fact do matter. So find a way to face oppression. Find a way to stand up to and in the face of it. Do it in whatever way works. If it's a choice about a purchase, am I going to purchase this bottled water? Am I going to support Nestle that's taking water from someplace else and putting it in plastic, and then these plastic bottles are going to go somewhere else that I don't know about. If I'm purchasing the water, am I putting the plastic in a place where it can be recycled? What am I doing? What one action can I do that's about oppression? That's about ending oppression. And then the other side that I want us to ask is, what good will we be doing for ourselves? How will we be facing our own internal oppressor? Letting that internal oppressor, how will we be ending that internal oppressor this week? That one that's getting up and saying, you know, you should do this. You should do this. You know you should do this. To be able to say, I'm not going to be guided by shoulds. And I'm going to be gentle and kind with myself. Those are the two actions that I'm inviting to come into a greater sense of greater good and oneness. Because how do we be one when we're divided, an oppressor and a victim? Let's bring them together and all be one. So it is.